Is your campus quietly training kids to stare at black rectangles, to tap, swipe, scroll, and repeat? On the surface, it looks like modern learning, but underneath, something essential is being stolen. The courage to try, the joy of making, and the confidence that only comes from putting something real into the world. Ruckus makers know if education ain't a bit disruptive, if kids never move beyond the screen, then what are they really learning? Today, my guest is Kris Rockwell from Piper, a company designing hands on computer and robotics kits that help kids build, code, and explore the future of technology with their own two hands. In our conversation, we challenge the tyranny of one way screens. We'll talk about why passive dopamine hit learning leaves kids distracted and disconnected, and how hands on building, tinkering, and apprenticeships flip the script. You'll hear the story of a student who went from being bullied and invisible to standing on stage, proudly presenting the 3D printed dragon she designed herself, and what that moment reveals about real confidence, real learning, and real belonging. I'm Danny Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for visionary school leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional system, so that we create campus experiences that are worth showing up for. Thanks to ruckus makers just like you, the show ranks in the top 1% of over 4 million worldwide podcasts. So once again, thanks for pressing play. Thanks for listening. And we'll be right back after a quick message from our show sponsors. Still scrambling for supplies like it's 1999? ODP Business Solutions streamlines everything from pencils to projectors so you can focus on what matters, making an impact. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Today's episode is brought to you by Play Piper. The innovators of tomorrow are sitting in classrooms today, but only if we give them the right tools. Piper's STEM kits connect kids' love of gaming with real-world coding and engineering, turning curiosity into career-ready skills. Keep your students engaged and inspired. Learn more at playpiper.com/ruckus. That's playpiper.com/ruckus. IXL is a go-to support for classroom teachers because its adaptive platform makes differentiated instruction easy. See for yourself and get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right. And Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So where I'd love to start is the challenges of education and sort of one-way screens and how you think about that.
One-way screens. Well, that's actually, it's interesting that you bring that up because it's something that we've been really looking a lot at. I think the one-way screen is I think it can be a very dangerous piece because I think you can get lost very easily. And I think it can be somewhat distracting. And I think one of the big challenges that I see with one-way screens is that it prevents you from, in many cases, from doing, from experiencing. You're looking at a screen, you're holding a screen, these little tablets that we have, these black screens. And I remember that was kind of the elegance of it, as I recall, Steve Jobs talking about when he unveiled the iPhone, right? That's the elegance of it, this black monolith screen that has all this information. But I think what it's become is this black monolith that we get lost in. We don't look up, and I think that one-way piece, I think feedback's important, and I think having that conversation back and forth is important. And that one-way screen doesn't always enable that. And so that's where I start to get very lost with it.
Yeah. And I guess could you frame it as like consuming versus, and you talked about doing and making, so is it just, it's problematic because it makes you so passive in the learning process and just the human experience, or?
Well, I think it is in both cases, right? These little one-way screens are very interesting because they we've now successfully created these models that just keep you engaged, right? That's the point of the screen, is to keep you engaged, to keep you focused on that screen, to not have you look up, to keep you there.
Hmm.
And, sure, I think there's an argument in the learning space that maybe, well, that could be useful, right? Because now you've got my attention and that's what you want in the learning world. But I don't think they're really built for that kind of engagement. So that kind of engagement does become very passive because we're just staring at something, or we're having, our kids stare at something and engage them in a way that is far more, I would suggest, perhaps addictive in its manner, could be, than we've seen in the past. And I think that that's a really challenging piece because it doesn't really allow for that two-way communication. And, typically the format now is coming in these very quick hits. If we think about it in terms of social media, they're very quick dopamine hits, right? Oh,
Hmm.
cool. And now on to the next thing. And now on to the next thing. And now on to the next thing. But by the time you get to that third thing, I'm going to guess you probably have forgotten what the first thing is.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of the concern that I have when it comes to these screens. You know, I'm far more interested when it comes to education in the two-way conversation. And it's not just the two-way conversation, I believe, between educator and student. It's two-way conversation between student and student. And that can
Hmm.
get very easily lost when you're just staring at a screen.
Yeah, 100%. My wife has this habit. I don't want to call it nasty, but maybe it is a nasty habit. And if she's having trouble sleeping, I'll know it because when I wake up, I have a curated feed of Instagram reels, right, that have been dropped into my DMs. I don't know if you experience this too. And then I kind of feel this pressure. I mean, she doesn't put it on me. Like I should maybe be watching this because they're like thoughtful, or she wants me to see them. And half the time, it's like about these amazing husbands, and I'm like thinking, what am I doing wrong? Like, what can I learn from this, and all this stuff. And then I'll try to loop back with her. I'm like, hey, what were you trying to communicate with it? And she'll be like, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? Like, to your point, she has zero memory of
Yeah.
any of the things that she is sending me. And so I find that fascinating. The other part that I've just learned, this is just a public service announcement for all our audience. Half the time my wife sends me something is about the comments, right? And I didn't realize that. I thought it was about, oh, let me check out this story. Like the
Yeah.
meaning of life will be revealed,
Sure.
right, in the 30 seconds. But it's really the people going off on the comments and how they react to the content that sometimes she wants me to see. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I don't want to sidetrack us too far, but
Well,
I
no,
wanted to bring that up real quick.
I think it is very. I think it's a very poignant comment. And there's a quote that it's I don't remember a whole lot of quotes
Yeah.
from things. I wish I were better at remembering quotes. But there is a quote by a gentleman, and I'm hoping I don't terribly butcher his name. I've always said it this way, but I'm not sure that it's correct. His name is Jaron Lanier, and he is largely considered the godfather of virtual reality. Really
Hmm.
interesting guy. And it's 2012, he gave a talk at a conference I attended in London called Learning Without Frontiers. And in the
Hmm.
conference, he made this statement. He said, the idea that Silicon Valley kids are defining how the rest of us communicate is the most perverse thing that's ever happened in the history of humankind.
Mm.
And that was 14 years ago. And I
Yeah.
think he's pretty much been right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's become a real focus on what we're doing, is how we communicate through these screens now, rather
Mm.
than looking at
Mm.
each other and talking. And that's a problem that is probably larger than anything we could really cover or get into this in this particular discussion. But it's a very big problem that's divisive in its way, and
Mhm.
it's troubling. And when it comes to these screens and watching kids interact, I remember I had a book. I don't know where it went. It's around here somewhere. But it was a study, from 2009, maybe 2010. But it was about kids and texting, and kids were sitting at parties next to each other, texting each other, which,
Instead of talking.
yeah, instead of talking, which was, I think at the time, in the way that it was framed in the study, was like, well, look, this is just how these kids are communicating. But I think that in and of itself has evolved into something that's probably fundamentally more detrimental to perhaps the human experience, but the learning experience, the interaction experience, and the knowledge and understanding of just how to have a conversation or how to do something. And I think these little screens, as with many things, started out with pretty good intentions. Way back when I was involved in more adult learning, when I was doing work mostly in the DoD and aviation space. This notion of YouTube was such a phenomenal piece because it was the idea that you could be out in the field. And in that case, I remember the one case study was, line guys working on cell phone towers could pull out a series of videos and look at how to repair something that they were looking at. And that obviously has some tremendous benefit. But I think the carryover and what's occurred there has made it more challenging, right? Because now we're learning we need to learn in 3 minutes rather than sitting through 40 minutes of class. And,
Mhm.
I think that speaks to attention capabilities and some other pieces.
Yeah, or apprenticeships, internships that last, years, and that kind of thing to
Huge
master a
deals.
craft, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So, one-way screens, is this concept that we started a conversation with. I don't know if two-way screens is the antidote or hands-on learning, but maybe you could speak to us, speak to the ruckus makers listening, viewing this, like, yeah, what's the what's the better way, right?
Yeah. That too is a difficult question, right? I mean,
There's no easy questions on this podcast, though.
no, there's no easy answers either.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
there are different ways to address that. I mean, we could talk about learning styles, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily even. I mean, we can see arguments that that's not even really a thing.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. I mean, I think one thing that maybe we could argue, possibly from my experience, is that the two-way screen item isn't necessarily a better solution or the best solution, and I only suggest that because that's what we were thrust into in 2020 with COVID. And
Right.
I think there's a very compelling argument to say kids were not in school, kids were doing distance learning. That was a two-way interaction over a screen. And I think a lot of those kids are struggling. There's a lot of learning loss that
Mhm,
happens
mhm,
there.
mhm.
So I'm not sure that that's necessarily, the most valid answer. I think hands-on tends to be in my mind something that makes a lot of sense because you're experiencing it, you're doing it. You're not just listening, you're doing. And I think that there's something
Yeah.
something big there. Again, years ago, this ties I was asked a question last night. I was at a dinner and I was asked a question about what was the most rewarding business venture or something that I had done.
Mhm.
And these guys were some venture guys, so I think they were probably thinking I was going to give them this big answer about like, well, this company and blah blah blah.
And multiples and all this stuff.
Right, but
Yeah.
the answer that I had, and I still stick to, was that, in 2013, I started with my business partner at the time, a nonprofit organization that we called the Additive Project, and what we had identified was that 3D printing at that time was becoming a very big thing, and I think, 3D printing to me was it is such an amazing tool because it is the democratization of manufacturing, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
and I can go down that road ad nauseum and talk about that because I think that's true. But in this case, we had looked around and what we saw were that there were a whole lot of 3D printing manufacturers that were gifting 3D printers to schools, which is great. I mean,
Mm.
that's fantastic. The problem was they were gifting the 3D printers to the schools. So the teachers would get them, but they're intimidating. They're not as easy to use as everybody suggests, or at least in 2013, they certainly wouldn't. So the answer was, well, I'll go out to Thingiverse, grab this thing and print it and say, look, this is what a 3D printer does. And now I've got my little plastic Yoda, which is cool, right? I mean, it's a
Mhm.
great demonstration. But that uncovered for us the fact that there was a huge gap in using these tools in the classroom. So we built a curriculum that was not, it wasn't complicated. We were using well, not open source, but free tools at the time that could teach basic 3D modeling. And so we went through this whole thing. But we were doing this in conjunction with a group here in Pittsburgh. And the kids, it was an after school program, but these were kids that typically in school were having trouble. They weren't focusing, whatever the issue was. And so it was reflecting in their behavior or in their grades. And so they're in this program as kind of I don't want to say a last ditch effort, but it was something along those lines. So
Hmm.
we built this 3D printing program, and we went in and taught these kids how to print and how to model and how to engineer and how to do these things, and basically gave them the freedom to do what they wanted. We didn't say no. We said,
Mm.
try it,
Yeah. Let's see
do
what
it,
happens.
see what happens. And I remember one particular story. There was a young girl there that had she modeled and printed out just this little dragon, but she designed it. She did all the modeling.
Hmm.
And she gave up, she got up in front of the school at the end of the semester, and their big assembly, and she got up and talked about it. And her parents came over and said, our daughter is so bullied at school. She has no
Hmm.
friends. She doesn't like to talk. She doesn't do this kind of thing. And that girl who has all these problems just got up in front of the school to talk about and show off what she did. So I think that act of doing, that process of that freedom of learning, and is something that has a lot of power to it, for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's something that, we in my everyday job, I mean, that's something that we really try to pursue, is that notion of, here are the instructions for this, but what can you do after this?
Hmm.
This is up to you now. Here's some ideas. How would you get there? And I think that that's really important, because it gives, it gives the kids that we work with this ability to do that, this ability to really function beyond just what's in the book or what's in the instructions in front of them. And I think that that's a huge part of what we're trying to, what I believe in terms of freedom and getting folks educated and interested.
Yeah. Well, the thing about that, I love that story. So thank you for sharing it. But it mirrors the human experience, right? Like, there's no
Yeah.
manual, and I love talking about the difference between play it safe principles and ruckus makers. So my 30-second riff is the play it safe principle. They are all about protecting the status quo. They improve, but it's incremental improvement, and they have the manual to follow. Like, here's how schools have traditionally been run. Turn to
Mhm.
page 36 when you have a union problem. Here's how to deal with it. Now,
Mhm.
ruckus makers, I love to say, visitors from the future, they're showing us how education can one day be.
Yeah.
And, there's no manual for this, right?
No.
It requires the skills of leadership and innovation. And just like the story you had, like, what are you going to build next? And this mirrors life, because most of life, in my experience, is like, okay, you kind of have to figure it out, right? You could have support and community and thought partners and this kind of stuff, but
Mhm.
it's not like, X plus Y equals Z type of thing.
Right. Right. And I think, what's really unique about where we are now with that thought process too, is that with a little exploration, you really have this ability to do things and learn things that didn't exist, it wasn't possible in the past.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, literally, I have a 3D printer. I can buy the rest of the parts I need on Amazon and find the schematics online that aren't that complicated to build a CubeSat that I could launch into space and have orbit for a couple of weeks before it fell back down to the Earth and disintegrated in the atmosphere. But I can do that. I
Mm.
can print those things. I can get those circuit boards. I can buy most of those components on Amazon. And that is a wild thing to think about. I mean, of
Yeah,
course,
it's super
we have to
wild.
get it there, which is a different
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
But to build the thing that we know we can get there, that can work, is with relatively, comparatively minimal effort to the way that it was. It kind of indicates where we are and what we can do.
Mm.
And I mean, the same thing can be said with, I mean, from electronics to science. I mean, it's not hard to do some really amazing work with DNA to understand how DNA works. And I mean, you can get a CRISPR kit and do it yourself in your basement now and learn how to do this. You can do it in the classroom at the high school level. And
Mm,
thinking about those kind of things to me is just nuts because, I couldn't have done that when I was in school. Like that information and that technology and that availability wasn't there. And now
mm,
it's there. It's not hard to get access to these things. And I think that that's an important piece because challenging people to do that, and I really believe that, like I believe giving that challenge forth and saying, well, look, here are the tools. If you want to do this, go do this. I will help you. We will figure this out together. But we've got the resources and we've got the tool sets to do these things. And, I mean, financial aspects are always kind of part of that equation and consideration. Again, comparatively, the things that can be done now at the cost that they can be done for are pretty remarkable. And I go back to 3D printing and the democratization of manufacturing.
mhm, mhm.
A lot of libraries have 3D printers. A lot of libraries have computers. You can go into a library, sit at a computer, or go to any number of websites to learn how to use the 3D modeling software. You can print your widget out in the library for pennies per, whatever, however they're measuring filament use these days. Work your thing out, have it perfectly. And, it used to be, I don't know what the storefronts are, but at the time, once you've got that up and working, you can create your own storefront on Amazon or what was Shapeways at the time and have your own business that makes these things without ever having inventory. And that's a heck of a thing. I mean, I keep
Yeah.
last night at dinner when I told that story, and even here in my office across the hall, one of my coworkers, he told me that his grandkids got in trouble at school because one of their friends has a 3D printer and they figured out how to print toys, which they were selling at school, and they made like $200, and
There you go.
and it's kind of, I mean, they didn't learn that in school. They figured that out on their own. And I
Yeah.
think there's something to be said for that in terms of challenging
I think
education.
that's super cool. I mean, and it's funny, like the school's response to that, because usually you have the kids that get candy in bulk, right, and sell that to make a
Yeah.
profit, and they're learning business at an early age. But now with 3D printing, I haven't heard that yet, but
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense that it's happening. So
Yeah.
really, really great. And I'm resonating, what you're saying with the democratization of stuff with 3D printing. I feel the same way, right, about how that happened with media and podcasts, right? Because man,
Absolutely.
it was so accessible and affordable to start this up. There weren't a lot of the biggest block was my own mindset, right? Like, are
Mhm.
people going to resonate or whatever? But if I set the intention, took action, tried to engage in great conversations with awesome people like you, then I figured the audience, will resonate with it. And it's 10 years later, it's absolutely changed the trajectory of my life.
Mhm.
Could you have told me, right, in 1980s in Palatine, Illinois, at St. Thomas of Villanova, right? Like, this is what you'll be doing, Danny.
Right.
There's no way, right? I could
Yeah.
have even
Yeah.
imagined it. Although my dad listened to a lot of radio, so I think there's some like ties to
Yeah.
that and
Sure.
whatever. But yeah, ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Let's talk about what keeps ruckus makers up at night. Creating engaging learning spaces while juggling budgets, safety protocols, and those endless supply lists. Here's the game changer. ODP Business Solutions helps you tackle it all. We're not just another vendor, we're your strategic partner in transformation. Want to turn a tired computer lab into a STEAM innovation center? We'll help design it. Need to keep 8 schools stocked and spotless? We've got sustainable solutions that scale. Looking to upgrade from whiteboards to interactive displays? We'll guide you through the entire process. And the best part, you can get it all from a single supplier. That helps you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. As educators, we've all seen it, the bright student who checks out of math or science because they feel like it's just not for them. Piper is here to change that story. With award-winning STEM kits and a coding curriculum, students move from passive learning to active building. They see how creativity, problem solving, and innovation all come together, and they love it. If you're looking to bring more engagement into your classroom, discover how Piper supports teachers and empowers students at playpiper.com/ruckus. That's playpiper.com/ruckus. Teachers love the support that IXL provides in the classroom, and ruckus makers love it all as well because IXL also gives school leaders meaningful insights on every level. Put your finger on the pulse of student performance with IXL and its dashboard to drill down to see progress and growth for individual students. You can even customize reports to hone in on the information that matters most to you. IXL helps ruckus makers make data-informed decisions that will benefit their students' growth goals. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. So I'd love to move us over to sort of how this connects to the work at Play Piper, right?
Mhm.
And how some of the kits you have available in curriculum gives them skills, hands-on. What are you building? What are you doing? Type of stuff, preparing kids, for jobs that don't exist yet.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important component is that statement right there. We're really on this strange precipice of things right now, right? I mean, clearly the biggest challenge in education, and I'm not, this is not me, there's no supposition here. If you go to any event, the dominant discussion is AI, right?
Yep.
How do we use AI in the classroom? What do we do about this? In the outside of the classroom, the question is, well, AI is going to take all of these jobs away. I'm not sold on that aspect quite yet, but what I believe is that what is going to happen, which has happened before in the past a number of times, is that a technology comes along that does, and it disrupts the job market, right? But then it thus creates new opportunities. Technology right now is clearly a huge opportunity, no matter how you look at it, from anywhere from HVAC to quantum computing, right? There's technology in all of these things. And your cars are run by computers now, right?
Shoot, I mean, my refrigerator, like all the appliances in the
Yeah.
house, right?
Yes.
Depending on how smart your house is. So
Yeah.
sorry to
I
cut you
mean,
off.
no. I mean, but that's the point, right? I mean, there's so much
Mhm.
technology there. So really, our goal at Piper is to one introduce technology in a really approachable, easy way, in a hands-on way, and that's one of the fundamentals. Everything we do at Piper, any kits that we build, have a build element to them. We give you blueprints. So you get the blueprints, you have to build the thing that we're doing, and then we're going to code the technology to make it do whatever you want to do or what we're trying to convey in the curriculum. The first kit that Piper made is a Piper computer kit. It's a Raspberry Pi based kit. It's all laser cut wood. So the kids have to build it before they can use it. But that build component is important because it starts to demonstrate what are the components of a computer. I mean, we all we have access to, or maybe we have these boxes that sit in our homes that do these things,
Right.
but I would bet a great majority don't know how those things work. What powers them? What are the components behind them? So what we're trying to do is demystify that and say, look, it's not really on its surface super complicated. And it's so not super complicated that when you build your computer kit, you don't have a keyboard to work with. You have a
Hmm.
breadboard. And we're going to teach you how to build the keys that get you to move around in the world that we have, which is based on Minecraft for Raspberry Pi. And I think that experience and that building component is huge because it gets kids again, away from the screen and just looking at animations or pointing and clicking things into actually physically building things. Every kit that we have includes a screwdriver. And it's surprising up until that point how few kids have actually held or understand how to use a screwdriver.
Hmm.
And so teaching that hands-on, I'm building this kind of component is a big deal. From that point, we're off to the races and we're teaching basic coding. We're teaching how to add sensors, all these things that I'd mentioned before, that things that couldn't be done, but are important. And the reason that we're doing this is because we believe that we're building a foundation for the jobs of tomorrow, so that
Yeah.
when the students using our products move on, because we're geared from third grade to eighth grade. When they move on, they've already got the foundation to get to the more complex robotics kits or software coding development platforms that now they've got to step up, because they already know the fundamentals of this going ahead, and they know the fundamentals not just of how to write the software, but how the software is interacting with the hardware to do the
Hmm.
thing, and the
Well, they
thing to
built it
be.
from they built it.
Right,
Yep.
and they built it. And the exciting part about that is we're getting away from screens. I mean,
Mm.
naturally, we've got a screen. You've got to use a laptop for our Piper make line, but the laptop gives you the instructions, and then you have to go do the thing and then come back and write the code for the thing to make it work, which I think is very different than passively looking at something and just clicking and dragging. And I think that's a very powerful experience. Very powerful experience.
Yeah. Well, connecting dots and back to how we started the conversation, if one's the one screen and the passive, fitting it in 3 minutes is a long time, right? So like 30 seconds or whatever, the engagement, versus actually building the thing that you could show off, that you could be
Mhm.
proud of, that you could be in a environment where you feel bullied and insecure and whatever, but because you've built this thing, you've got the confidence to show the world.
Right.
Like what it that's that you can't even put a price tag on that for a
Yeah.
kid, right? So it's really pretty interesting work.
We have this we've done this thing at our facility in San Francisco that we've done for the past couple of years. We have a school district that comes down. It's usually in August. There's, I think it's like 25 kids, maybe a few more, maybe 30. They come to the warehouse. We show them around the warehouse and where we build these things, and then we spend the day with them building a project or two. But my favorite part is at the end we have this time where we say, okay, now you guys are gonna assemble into teams of like 3 to 5, and we want you to think about what you've done here, and go design something new
Hmm.
based on what you have. Whatever you want. There's no constraints. Let your minds go as far as you want them to go. And it's so exciting. Oh, and then we have them present, right? So it's not
Mhm,
like they're just
mhm,
like off the hook. Like we give them, poster board and markers and say, go design it based on what you've learned here. Figure out this widget and what it's going to do and how it's going to, how's it going to change the world.
mhm.
And it's remarkable to watch the excitement, the enthusiasm, the confidence when these kids are given that freedom and they come up with these ideas. Because, the great thing about, I think, being younger is that you still have that wild imagination,
Right, you don't
that,
filter, "Oh,
that,
this is
that,
stupid, it'll never work."
yeah, you've got this freedom. And I think that that's a really powerful tool,
Mm.
because that, in terms of driving education, is incredible. And I mean, this all came. I mean, all of our kits in this ideology, came from our founder, and our founder. She was the first. She was the winner of the first Google World Science Fair project, and out of that came the Piper computer kit. Saying there's a need here, and we're doing these kids a disservice. And I mean, it's funny to think about that, because she's, like 17 at the time, talking about how we're doing these kids a disservice. So we need to find a better way to educate them about computer components and building and teaching coding. And I'm like, yeah, but you're 17, you're a kid yourself. So cool. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that's kind of the point, and
Mhm,
that's the foundation that we have. And I think it's really important. And we try to bridge that across a spectrum of different platforms, everything from basic circuitry to robotics to artificial intelligence. And again, it is simply from our perspective giving these kids the foundation upon which they can build wherever they want to go with their careers. And
Mhm.
we're seeing now a really big push. It's been growing over the past, I mean, what I've seen over the past year and a half for, CTE lessons and career tracks and things.
Yep.
And, yeah, we're trying to make that bridge because we see that that's important. And that goes back, I think, I'm hopeful that part of that goes back to the notion of apprenticeship, right? Because I think that that's
Mhm.
a really powerful piece within education is that notion of apprenticeship and learning from experts. I mean, even in even in the workforce that exists now, we're seeing a turnover of folks that have a lot of knowledge, and that knowledge isn't necessarily being passed down. So then new folks enter, but the old folks that have the knowledge are already gone. So it's kind of like, well, where do we start? Where do we go? And that's not an easy problem to solve. So having that foundation and that foundational piece, but figuring out that apprenticeship model, through career training exercises may be a really good path and educating ahead.
So this is going to be above my pay grade, this question, but I remember it from our intro talk. So I was
Mhm.
fascinated. I wanted to bring it in. But, I remember you saying that Piper Kids show us where we're going as a society, especially when it comes to tech and AI. And I've been dying to ask you, what does this mean, Kris? What does this mean? Because I don't know. I don't know. I'm interested in these things, but I'm clearly not an expert. So I can't wait to hear how you answer this.
Yeah, well, I think when we do these exercises, and when we work with kids and ask them to really produce for us, some form of like, how are we going to solve this? What are we going to do? We see some really interesting paths forward. The challenge of AI is a big one. And I'm not so positive that the challenge of AI are the things that we typically think of every day when we talk about the challenges of AI. I look at it from much more of there's a lot of philosophy and ethics that goes into this, and how we're using the tools now and how the kids are using the tools and what that means. I was just reading a paper the other day about the notion of AI in the classroom and in colleges and what that means in terms of how kids are producing papers and writing papers or having the AI write the papers. The article posited that perhaps we should go back to blue books and pencils for our exams, which I don't disagree with. I think that's actually a pretty powerful notion, right? Because at the end of the day, that's going to be how you show off your knowledge, right? I mean, when you're doing your PhD, you've got to defend your dissertation. And what are you doing in that defense? You're showing off that you have the knowledge that you are putting forth in your dissertation. And I think that that's an important piece of this that we see. And I think that those pieces, from the Piper kids that we talk to and how they show us the way is, you know, our kits are fairly flexible and open. We certainly have a curriculum, but we want to give the kids the ability to experiment. And, the ideas that they come up with and the things that they do at grade levels that I would not have been able to do that at those grade levels, but I didn't have the opportunity to access these tools, right? I didn't have this kind of education. And so, I think that that is something that is very powerful. And that's really what I see. I mean, I'm always excited to see how kids are using our products and what they're doing and the ideas that they come up with or the things that they take away. I mean, we teach, we've got a couple of pieces on AI that focus more on the machine learning aspect, but, seeing their understanding of how that functions because AI is by and large a black box, right? I mean, information goes in, information comes out. So how does this work? How does this machine learning work? What's happening behind it? And then what do you do with it?
Mhm.
I think are very important components to what we're doing. And I really get excited when I see kids come up with these ideas and these methodologies and what they take away from what we're ostensibly teaching them with our kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking about my work and I like to play and experiment with AI and that kind of thing and use it for some thought partnership and critiquing, maybe content that I'm creating, that kind of thing, or how to build something or whatever. But these days I've been getting like more obsessed with storytelling, right? And so doing the Moth in
Yeah.
Boston or New York, that kind of deal, like that. At least right now, that's I think untouchable by AI because I need to show up. I need to make that audience feel something, right? They're
Mhm.
human. And yeah, started intro to improv classes in
Mhm.
2026. There's this concept, Japanese concept called a misogi, right? So that yearly defining event in your life. So I'm gonna do
Mhm.
some open mic stand up in 2026. But like again, the robots, AI, technology can't do that for me. I have to face my
You have
fear,
to do that. Yeah.
face that crowd, see if I could get them to feel something and react. But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that. So I don't know that it added a ton to our conversation other than what's weird. Like the paradox is I'm very interested in this topic, right? And
Mhm.
what's AI and the implications in education and society and that kind of thing. And I find myself getting drawn and pulled to hobbies that are like as off the grid and
Yeah.
techless, as possible, even though there's microphones, lights, this kind of stuff. But
Sure. Well,
yeah,
look, AI does a good job. I think, I mean, beyond my, outside of my Piper work, I'm in the midst of a PhD and I'm focusing on AI and consciousness, right?
yeah.
So AI does a really interesting job of raising the question of where does the human begin, where does the computer end, or vice versa, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it can. I don't think we have any public, and I'll say that because I'm not sure what goes on in research labs and places, but I don't think we have
Yeah,
any
sure.
public AI systems that really can show consciousness. But then again, we can't, I mean, trying to figure out what consciousness even is can be a challenge, right? I mean,
Hmm.
so I think that it's a slippery slope and it's, you're kind of like dancing on something when you're using this and trying to figure out how it's working. And I think that's part of the important thing that we need to teach, right? Is, well, it's a tool and we need to figure out how to make that tool work and how to not make that tool the tool,
Yeah.
right?
Or me, right?
Or
That it's a
you.
part of my identity,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think you're right. I mean, there are things that AI currently can't do. I mean, there's the notion of the learning the large language model, which is the backbone for a lot of the stuff that we use. But that can't really achieve that kind of humanity level pieces until we get to the fact that it has sensors, which has been described as an LLM plus. Maybe one day we'll get there. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Upgrade to your subscription though,
Upgrade your say,
for
yeah.
sure.
Well, I think that's the other problem, right? And then that's the
Yeah.
other component to this is there has to be some sort of profitable revenue generation there, and that's what it's going to be for a long time. And
Mhm.
what does that mean as well? You know,
Right. So how is infotech? This is from the pre call too, right? How infotech is becoming like math as a fundamental concept to learn. And can you define that for the audience too, if it's the first time like hearing like what does infotech even mean, but then being able to connect it to how math is like so fundamental.
well, so information technology, infotech, right? I mean, that's these technologies in what we do with computers and systems is a fundamental. At this point, we're almost where we have to understand some of it, right? Because be it how do you get something connected to your internet in your house, or going back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Your refrigerator is now some complicated piece of infotech, right? And I think that does become a fundamental piece just for understanding how unless we live completely off the grid in the woods and, we regress there, it is a part of your life. We carry these things in our pockets now that are the gateway to most of information, right? These little devices that we have access to. So understanding that and, understanding, I mean, digital literacy in and of itself is a big component, right? So understanding that is a
Mhm.
huge part of what we're doing in the learning world. and what's being taught, because that's a big thing. And I think we can see that even digital literacy, what you read is not always reality. So how do you discern those things? In terms of being related to something like math, I mean, those two are fundamentally intertwined. I mean, it is math that powers all of the things behind us. And in math fascinates me, right? Because,
Mm.
physicists using math to identify, anything and create these theorems that then posit these theories for how things work. I read this really wild article on a website about black holes and information storage in black holes.
Okay.
And yeah, right. So it was not, what the theory was, okay, so for a long time they thought that maybe information was pulled into black holes and the black hole was just this thing of information. But now they think that like the information is actually on the surface of the black hole. And it was this really weird, complicated theory. And I read it, I think like 3 times before I really understood what they were saying. And then
Uh,
I thought to
I
myself,
usually get it on the second, I have to
yeah,
say,
no,
but
I need 3 at and it's going to, but I read it and then I just sat there for a moment. And I was like, no, okay, we can't, we can't even really see, you can't see a black hole in space. Like I
Mm.
mean, we know they're there and all these things, but like someone had to, like, how did this happen? Like there's an astrophysicist out there that was like, well, I'm going to do a math problem that's going to show how this works. And it's kind of like, what? And then sold that theory on, so like now you've got
Mhm.
like 6 astrophysicists, right, sitting in a room going like, oh yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah. Oh right. Yeah. I see if you put X over here, and it's kind of like, man, that stuff's far beyond my pay grade. I mean, it's crazy mathematics, but I think it shows that the underpinning of so much of these things is in fact math. So
Mm.
when we see that and then we understand how the information technology world is evolving so quickly and how big it becomes and how important it is to everything that we do now as a society to function. Yeah, it's critical to understand this and see how it works, or at
Right
least get a
on.
basis of how it works.
Well, last Piper related question before I get everything. Last 3 questions I ask all my guests. I know you have some updates coming with the kids around wireless and cybersecurity modules. So, is there anything you'd like to share along those lines?
Yeah, we're actually we're pretty excited in what we're doing here at Piper. Most of the kits that we have, and we've got 2 product lines. We have our computer kit and our make system. And our make system is the one that I love our computer kit. I get really excited about make because of the infinite expansion possibilities. And up until now, our make system really has focused as a tethered system. So we have robotics kits, but they're always wired with these really long wires. So they're kind of limited in how they move. So we've been working on removing that tether. And we've finally gotten to the systems to how we want them to work. That's simple, because that's a big part of what we do, right? I mean, the reality is that there's a whole lot of complex behaviors behind these things, but we need to make it addressable and easy because we recognize that not every teacher that touches this or that may be using this is an electrical engineer or a computer scientist. We use breadboards, and breadboards, I still find them intimidating in ways because you're plugging a bunch of wires in and things are everywhere, and it's kind of like, what's happening here? So we recognize that we want to make this as easy in the classroom as possible. So we've done that with this wireless kit, and we're really excited because again, as we pursue supporting CTE programs, what we recognized was that cybersecurity is a really big area for sure. Judging by the letter I got from my bank today, cybersecurity is important because they're telling me that my information is out in the ether again, for
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
umpteenth time from whatever website has been taken down. So we know that that's a big deal. And what we're developing and putting into place is a really cool system that allows these 2 wireless units to be used by different students and figure out like how to intercept a signal, how to get the signal that the other one's sending, or maybe how to, interpret a password. So you start to understand the importance of cybersecurity and password protection and how these things work, but put it in a way that's fun and that makes sense.
Mm.
Again, it's a foundational piece. We're not here to solve all of the problems. That's never our intention, but we are here to at least lay those initial bricks upon which the rest of these things can be built. So
Fundamentals.
we're super excited about it, and that, of course, will then evolve into robots that we're building our kits that will be wireless and moving around, which is really neat because we see a lot of really cool robotics kits. We just love that ours are wooden and they're approachable, and you build them and program them, and then they go off on their own. Hopefully not with crazy AI, right?
That's right. Cool. So if you could put one message on all school marquees for a single day, what would your message be, Kris?
Explore your world. I mean, don't get that tunnel vision. There's a whole lot of things out there. This world, this universe is so big, and there's so much to see and so much to do and so much to understand. And, having the curiosity to do that, I think, is really important. And I think it should be encouraged. I mean, that's
Mm.
anytime you find something that starts to try to limit people and students and what they're doing, I think it's a great disservice. I think
Yeah,
having that ability to explore outside of the confines is a really big deal. It's kind of like, you know, you don't always have to color inside the lines.
for sure. That's the ruckus maker way. I've lived in 5 states, 4 different countries, and that's probably the best experience, best gift I've given myself, right? Because you
Yeah.
learn so much about yourself, but ways of living, ways of
Hey,
doing things, and you
my,
become a little less like, okay, this is the one way, right? Like,
yeah.
so I
My,
really
my,
appreciate that.
my first job out of college was working for an airline, and we got to fly for free.
Yeah,
And I went everywhere.
that's
And that
awesome.
was the most important thing to me in growing as a person, was being able to see, wow, this is a big space.
Well, talk to me about building your dream school. You're not limited by resources at all. Your only limitations, your ability to imagine. So, building your dream school, what would be like the 3 guiding principles?
The three guiding principles: open exploration, doing away with standardized testing. I think that standardized tests kind of pigeonhole things, and
Mm,
that's not always the best way. Which that gives you to the third point, which my dream school is allowing kids to explore in such a manner that they are exploring their education in a way that's super beneficial to them. Doesn't have to have all the technology in the world, but I think there's some really good input and options there to make that something that would be phenomenal.
mm.
Go big. Don't don't think about this thing that's in front of you. Think about the thing that's all around you.
Well, we covered a lot of ground on this conversation. Of everything we discussed, Kris, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
I think we just kind of hit on it again. That idea of exploration and not necessarily having to look at somebody and to say no. I mean, giving that freedom of exploration, that freedom to explore beyond what is just right in front of you. I think that's a huge deal, and really fostering that.
Hey, Ruckus Maker, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I enjoyed recording it. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something for you, where you want to do school different or you have a new idea about education, then I want to invite you to subscribe to ruckusmakers.news. That's our newsletter. And you get 3 new opportunities to do school different every week sent to your inbox. It's trusted by over 5,000 school leaders. And if you want to reimagine education within a traditional setting so that you could create a campus experience worth showing up for, subscribe for free at ruckusmakers.news.